Would you buy this three-wheeled electric vehicle for $1,800? Arcimoto is an electric vehicle manufacturer which will soon be delivering their flagship three-wheeled vehicle, the FUV, which stands for Fun Utility Vehicle. They also feature a delivery-focused vehicle and a patrol vehicle. Although all of the models are really based on the same design, the delivery unit is obviously fairly small, tiny, compact. The rapid responder features lights, sirens, and other accessories that make sense for security guards and people like that. But all three of these are based on the same platform with rather minor differences. Additionally, they recently revealed a Trike that they call the Roadster model, and I personally think it could end up being their most popular product by far. I definitely want to get more into this, but that's going to be later in the video. Electric vehicle stocks have been soaring recently, and there's obviously a lot of hype around them after we've seen Tesla finally get some love from the S&P 500 inclusion. Arcimoto, while much smaller, has definitely been in the limelight. Arcimoto is a company that's been around for over a decade, actually. They've actually been designing prototypes since 2007, and only became publicly traded in 2017, a decade later. Their entire history page is actually very interesting. They've been through a lot of different designs, with some of their earlier models resembling something like the Solo from Electromechanica, which is a small three-wheeled enclosed vehicle that tries to get a little farther to the car end of the spectrum. But as they state themselves, they really came full circle. They tried different designs, and ultimately this is what they ended up with. This company has been obsessed with prototypes and development. They've actually partnered with Sandy Munro, the engineer who tears apart cars, to analyze them and sell detailed engineering reports to other companies. Honestly, I think this is seriously good news because Sandy's very experienced. He's an excellent engineer who spent a lot of time in the vehicle manufacturing space. Tons of huge companies buy his reports, and his predictions have been pretty accurate, especially on Tesla. From all of this, it's pretty obvious that Arcimoto leadership has placed a large emphasis on launching a quality, functioning product. They're spending a lot of time and assets refining it, and potentially they're doing a little too much. The interesting thing I really find about this company is that they're willing to change things. Honestly, this company has impressed me. I've made a video previously discussing Arcimoto and going into a lot of details about them, and there were really three big criticisms I had about them. And the company actually addressed every single one, to varying degrees. I'm not saying it's completely perfect, but it's really cool to see when a company recognizes potential problems, potential complications, and goes about trying to deal with them. The video I made previously discussing Arcimoto and the big things I praised about them were the massive commitment to quality they obviously had. They spent a lot of time developing their product, and they didn't want to release garbage to the public. Their commitment was admirable. I also commented on their relationship with Sandy and how that's a serious commitment to quality as well. I did have some major concerns about the company, though. However, as I mentioned, Arcimoto actually addressed every single one. And a lot of this video is going through how they address those things that could be potentially concerning, which I'm really happy about. I don't want to see a company fail, especially when it involves a lot of passionate people. The biggest criticisms I had were, one, the company had been around so long without having mainstream deliveries, where you could just go to their website and buy the product. Being started in 2007 and not selling product at production is concerning. It's hard to say exactly how the design went, if it was more of a side hobby or project that grew, or if it was a serious commitment from the beginning. There's only so many interviews and information available, but they're long past that stage. They have their product that they're presenting, and hopefully any future products don't suffer a delay this extreme since they're all built on the same platform. Although, really, with a small company that doesn't need to deal with corporate bloat, you should really be making usage of lean principles. That's what makes rockstar companies, releasing products in a reasonable amount of time with good quality. I also had concerns about the price starting at $19,900, as well as the market they were going after. And I think they actually fixed a lot of those issues. A lot has changed about the company, and I think they addressed a lot of those issues to a certain degree. The first major thing is that they're actually shipping some products rather than an extremely limited distribution that they had before. You can see here, the FUV is now shipping to West Coast pre-order customers. Here's their delivery map of the West Coast, which I think is beautiful. I am happy to see that they are making deliveries. Granted, it's limited, but you also have tons and tons of population here. And they actually partnered with DHL to distribute all of these. This was definitely my biggest concern. All the delays with almost no product being shipped. There were a couple delivered, but they were drips and drips to very select few. I really do respect the fact that they are sending products out now. It is through a limited capacity, only on the West Coast, but I'm really happy that it's actually happening at some sort of scale rather than a trickle to a few select customers. I mean, take a look at their earnings report published with the SEC. We can see the 2020 numbers for product sales compared to 2019 for 3 months and then for 9 months. It's literally an order of magnitude different. So they're actually selling more and more. They're progressing, which makes me happy. Second, they cut the price by $2,000. That might not sound like much, but the lower the price gets, the more customers are available. You just need to ensure that you optimize and that you don't cross the threshold where lowering the price hurts you. Because as you lower the price, more people will be willing to buy it. But after a certain point, you dig so deep into your margin and don't add as many customers that it doesn't make any sense to lower it any farther. And finally, there is that market segment discussion. Now, I've talked a lot about improvement, but let's take a closer look at this market segment discussion later on in the video. But I will say the Roadster is a very smart approach, in my opinion. As mentioned before, they dump tons and tons of time and money into this one platform. So if you don't like their platform, you really shouldn't invest in the company. Let's take a look at their product and really go over the specs. It's a 3-wheeled vehicle with the following specs: a 0 to 60 time in 7.5 seconds, a 75 mile per hour top speed, turning circle of 29 feet, 77 brake horsepower, a range of 100 miles in the city, and then they actually do provide different ranges at different speeds, which is pretty important for electric motors, especially if they don't have any sort of transmission. Its gross vehicle weight is 1,800 pounds, and it has an 80-inch wheelbase. The 32 miles at 70 miles per hour is pretty rough. It can achieve highway speeds, although there are tons of highways in the US that are higher than 80 miles an hour. So you probably don't want to take it on the highway often. However, if you really have to get on the highway or you regularly commute on a highway of probably 65 miles per hour, I imagine it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I'm actually a little surprised at that 0 to 60. 7.5 seconds is pretty slow for an electric motor that puts out 77 brake horsepower. A big fat touring motorcycle like the Vulcan 1700 only puts out 73 horsepower, but a lot of the Vulcan motorcycles can do 0 to 60 in 6 seconds or less. And they're big, fat, heavy motorcycles that don't put out tons of power, especially the older models. And as mentioned before, they have the delivery version, the rapid response version, and the Roadster version. Now, as you can see, all of these are really based around the same platform, which makes sense for such a small company. It would not make any sense to have tons of different production lines, especially when they've invested so much into a single platform. Now, before I get into criticisms and concerns, I want to make it clear, I don't think this is a scam company or that the leadership of this company is outright wrong. I wish I didn't have to say this, but a lot of people seem to take concerns and playing devil's advocate, questions about fundamentals, about business models and products as attacks on the company. I think it's always worth bringing up ways that a company can fail, issues that they can have, because you need to sit down and possibly come to a different conclusion that this will be a hindrance to them or it won't be an issue. No, I don't think this company is a joke, and I really do believe that their founder has good intentions and is creating a product for a space he doesn't see filled. Now, the founder passionately talks about how he does not see a small, ultra-efficient vehicle in the current US vehicle market, and he's kind of right. In terms of subcompact cars, those exist, and they used to be sold by a lot of companies. However, automakers have overwhelmingly discontinued small cars. Now, granted, they weren't small 3-wheel vehicles. that's a little more efficient than these subcompacts, but these have just not been successful. You could see tons and tons of auto manufacturers, Ford, GM, even Toyota is getting rid of the Yaris hatchback. These super small vehicles have really bad margins and they don't have a lot of demand behind them. Americans overwhelmingly choose SUVs and trucks. So it really doesn't make sense for a lot of these manufacturers, even the big ones who can make stuff at scale and make stuff for way cheaper than small startups. It doesn't make a ton of sense for them to actually sell these vehicles. They don't want to fight over this incredibly small market with horrendous margins. It's breadcrumbs to them. And if we look at top-selling vehicles by state, it's overwhelmingly trucks, SUVs, trucks, with some cars mixed in there. So does the FUV fill its space? I would say it does, but the main reason I don't think that space is really filled is because it likely isn't that particularly profitable to jump into. The founder has made a lot of good points. It's really insane that we have all of these huge vehicles on the roads that are only really being used to go to Starbucks alone. Like someone has this giant 5-ton SUV driving around getting horrendous gas mileage, and they're just going to places alone or commuting to work. They have a giant truck, but they never actually haul anything in it or tow anything with it. But if you have insanely low gas prices and insanely low interest rates like we do, people are just going to buy these trucks and SUVs. In many ways, vehicles are status symbols, and people are willing to get a pretty large loan on this status symbol. The people buying small, cheap vehicles tend to only play in the used market, which has much lower prices. It's a completely different environment. So it's difficult to imagine a huge reversal of these soccer moms driving their SUVs. Another thing is that safety has become such a huge, compelling point for car buyers. We see modern data, time and time again, show that the most important features for customers buying a new vehicle is safety of the vehicle and safety features. Safety features like blind spot protection, forward collision warning and avoidance, lane departure warnings, and much of this data is from 2018 and 2019. It's really just become more and more extreme each year. People are really obsessed with safe vehicles and safe vehicles that feature technology that helps keep them safe. That's a massive driving factor in the new vehicle market. Now, they do talk about safety and the steps they take to make it the safest motorcycle class vehicle on the road. But what they really talk about is quality control and the stability that their Trike platform offers, as well as a couple integrated safety systems. But this micro-sized open Trike vehicle does not invoke the feeling of safety like a large SUV does. It, in many ways, is the polar opposite of what most people in the new car market want. And I think it's very possible that it will be viewed as a motorcycle by normie consumers and viewed as a car by the motorcycle community, which is a potentially dangerous line to straddle. The founder talks about multi-car families and how he does not see the FUV as a primary vehicle. He sees it as a secondary vehicle for multi-car families. And I definitely agree and think that it makes sense that it is a secondary vehicle, not a primary vehicle. But I do have qualms about the multi-car family adopting something like this. Again, it comes down to safety. To speak anecdotally, my family was really in a difficult financial situation when I was growing up. We didn't have the money to get me a car when I was 16 like many more well-off families do. In that case, I just didn't have a car. I rode my bike miles and miles. Things got better over time, and my youngest brother got an old Econobox to drive to work. It was an old beater, but it had relatively modern safety standards, and my parents would absolutely kill him if he drove it without his seatbelt on or if the airbag light was lit up. Yeah, it was an older car with dents and scratches, but it wasn't a death trap from the 80s. Even as a grown-ass man, my experience and my friend's experience was that their parents really don't want their kid driving something dangerous. They understand when you're young, you sometimes do dumb things, and you simply have less experience driving. Now, I guess you could say the parents would be driving the FUV while the kids drive the cars. But again, speaking anecdotally, the first thing to go when a couple settles down and the wife is pregnant is the motorcycle. And not to say that the FUV is a motorcycle. It's classified as one in tons of states and other stuff, but I think the general view is going to be more skewed for motorcycle-like vehicle when it comes to regular consumers. And this is a conversation that almost everyone with a motorcycle has probably had at some point. Is it irresponsible to ride as a parent? This conversation happens a lot. It is a more dangerous habit, and it's something that tends to be cut out as you settle down. The people overwhelmingly buying new vehicles are older homeowners, generally more established families raising kids. Now, data on how many are married with kids and whether or not they still ride is pretty hard to find. And I'd like to say there was a lot of anecdotal talk mixed in with actual statistics. There's tons and tons of statistics showing that people want trucks and SUVs, that they want safe vehicles with tons and tons of safety features. They want these big cars with safety features. But the other discussion I had, a lot of that was anecdotal, and I don't think it's unreasonable for someone to disagree when I don't necessarily have a study to back it up with. But I really don't think it's that unreasonable that parents might not want their kids driving something like this. It is a niche product. Can they manage impressive sales for a year, maybe 2 years? How many Americans actually want this vehicle, and how long is this small vehicle going to be relevant for the consumer market? Remember, this vehicle is only available in the US right now, a market infamous for buying big, massive trucks and SUVs. Now, I mentioned before that Arcimoto addressed a lot of the concerns I had, one of which was market segment. And I think a lot of that comes down to the Roadster prototype that they revealed. Arcimoto has been teasing this Roadster style FUV for a little while now, and I honestly think this is a really good idea, that it might be the future of the company. Many of their products we've discussed are unlikely to be daily commuter, in my opinion, and I think there's a lot of data to back that up, that tons of people are not going to be buying this to drive to work. But this motorcycle-like trike vehicle could be a pretty good seller. The reason I think this is, one, it's going to have less parts and hopefully be cheaper, which would open it to a wider buying market. And two, trikes are actually pretty popular. I'm sure you might be thinking, trikes are popular? That might sound shocking for people not in the motorcycle world, but yes, trikes are huge sellers. Harley obfuscates many of their exact stats, such as model breakdown and average rider age now. But if you go to any Harley dealership, you are more than likely to see a lot of trikes in their top bikes, their top sellers. I mean, seriously. Again, we kind of get into anecdotes because it's hard to get exact data. A lot of it has sort of been smothered up, but these trikes are very popular. They're a big seller from Harley, and they've been in production for a while now. Their trike lineup has actually expanded. They go across markets with huge, exorbitant prices, but people buy these, and they've been selling them for a long time now. A lot of riders will jokingly call them the mobility scooters of the motorcycle world, but despite that, they are popular. Now, I'm not implying that Harley riders will buy an FUV Roadster, but it is absolutely true that there is a decent-sized market out there for trikes, especially with the older crowd who no longer feels like they can manage a two-wheeled vehicle. Maybe they suffered injuries, maybe they just don't have the same sense of balance anymore, or maybe they are kind of concerned about a two-wheel vehicle and managing it, and they just want to get a trike. Even super niche brands like Can-Am are still selling their three-wheeled Spider, which has been in production since 2007, the year Arcimoto was founded. And they've sold for well over a decade now. Evidently, they've been selling so well that they continue to produce these. They have courses, they have promotions, they have tons of things related to the Spider. And if we take a look at their lineup, they have a super affordable model under 10 grand, a mid-range model, $1,600, and then a higher-end model at $23,300. And these are just the regular ones you can buy. They also offer custom vehicles you can buy for even more money. I mean, these things really sold incredibly well, hitting 100,000 units sold from 2007 to 2015, which is seriously impressive for something so niche and so expensive, really, especially when you compare it to common commuter cars like Corollas or Civics. Internal combustion trikes do have a lot of things that make them a pain to live with. They need to be winterized unless the owner is living in an area that supports year-round riding. And generally that involves pulling the battery, getting fuel stabilizer throughout the system, filling the tank, and putting a cover on it. Then you need to get ready for riding once the weather improves. That might not sound like a lot of work, but it can definitely get annoying, especially when you consider other annual tasks like valve adjustments on some engines, oil changes, transmission fluid, tons of other maintenance items for internal combustion engines. And a lot of these trikes are bought by older riders, so a low maintenance electric version could be very appealing to them, especially since they're bought almost exclusively as secondary toys rather than dedicated daily drivers. And sitting is the worst thing you can possibly do to an internal combustion engine. Because of this, I think the Roadster FUV makes a lot of sense and has a lot of potential, but they really need to try to tip the needle towards the motorcycle side of things rather than the microcar side. However, a lot of motorcycle culture involves things like exhaust noise, performance, and wrenching. Now, trikes are definitely purchased by a certain demographic, but it might be difficult to market this product to that group of people. Then again, there are companies like Zero Motorcycles, which really came out of nowhere and have shipped in volume since 2010. That's a decade of selling electric motorcycles and expanding their line. Although a lot of initial success was supported by funding from military and police contracts, a light, silent off-road motorcycle was particularly popular with state and federal governments. I think over the long term, this path might make a lot of sense. Ignore the utility aspect and double down on the fun. The data we currently have overwhelmingly suggests that people are not going to be using something like this for a daily vehicle or grocery getting. Make it a fun toy like motorcycles or trikes. At least, that's how most Americans use them. There certainly are countries, especially in Asia, that use small air-cooled motorcycles as daily, common utility vehicles. But again, this vehicle is only being sold in the US right now. The self-driving space has been making progress constantly, and it's very possible that we see robo-taxis in the next 5 years. At that point, what will be the point of a small little commuter vehicle like this? It's not really well suited for long trips or extended highway usage. It's more of a city vehicle that can manage stretches of highway. And I think robo-taxis will murder city cars, but not things like motorcycles or trikes. People in North America don't drive motorcycles or trikes because they're practical or better commuters. They don't spend $24,000 on a trike when they can have a very practical Corolla or Civic for much cheaper because they want it to be practical as a commuter vehicle. They want to get groceries with it. They drive them because they're fun, because they bring some joy and love to life. And they're more than happy to pay a lot of money for this fun toy. But they are realistic about what it is. It's a secondary vehicle that they focus on for enjoyment. And over the long term, I'm talking the next 5 years or so, I think it is important that Arcimoto really does focus on the fun aspect. There are companies that make these niche vehicles work and that have impressive sales. But the recurring theme of these companies like Can-Am or Zero is that they are very much in the toy category for a lot of people. They really do swing more on the motorcycle side of things and try to attract that crowd. And companies like Zero were able to make use of all of the advantages that come with electric motors. Silence, low maintenance, powerful acceleration, and no need for gasoline resupply. They made use of this in order to sell a peerless product to military and police. Now, obviously, the FUV is very different. It's not suited for off-road usage yet, and trikes are larger and far less agile than a motorcycle, so I definitely expect the market to lean farther toward the toy side, sort of like Can-Am, rather than selling military and police vehicles. But they could find niche adoption in that case, especially off-road. And by off-road, I mean around campuses and other things like that, event centers. And I think it really could depend on their image and how they market their vehicles. Can they court multiple markets? It's definitely possible. Maybe they do get some of that microcar market if it's out there. But I really do think they should be going after that motorcycle market. Now, I don't have access to any internal market data that Arcimoto might possess. They might have the math to back up their regular FUV, but I think that if this company finds success, it's most likely going to be in the Roadster side, like how other niche companies turn a profit. I think it makes a lot more sense to focus on the F rather than the U. I really don't think these small three-wheel vehicles will be a compelling utility vehicle to many people. However, their Roadster and future more motorcycle-like vehicles could definitely find success in the trike market. Honestly, I think it would make more sense to double down on the performance and try to tip the scale more towards the motorcycle trike crowd. As I said earlier in this video, all of my biggest concerns have been addressed by the company. Delivering product, price, market segment. Now, to the degree that they've attacked each of these potential issues can be argued, but it's very promising when a company addresses things that could harm them. I'm very glad that I'm making an update video. I'm very glad that there's news to talk about. I'm very glad that things are different for them, that they've attacked all of these points, and hopefully they'll continue to march towards each of these. Ideally, these vehicles become cheaper. They get more and more options in the trike space. They deliver more and more product. That's ultimately what's going to fuel this company. Their manufacturing supply process has also improved a lot, which is obviously really important, especially if you want to get costs down. That's the difficult thing. I know I criticize price, and price is important. We can't just ignore it. However, you do need to realize that if you're not a large company, it's difficult to make stuff for cheap. There's obviously a lot going on. They've obviously recognized potential areas of concern. I'm really happy to see them change. It's going to be fascinating to see how this company ends up in a year or two. But even more interesting, I think, will be what their top seller is and where they end up in 5 years from now. If you're interested in getting into the market and using self-directed trading, a fantastic way to start is with Webull. If you sign up now, you can get 3 free stocks. I have a referral link in the description, and again, if you sign up, you can get a free stock valued between $2.50 to $250, and then you'll receive 2 other free stocks valued between $800 and $1,600 if you deposit $100 or more. There are no fees or anything with depositing money. You just get your stocks. If you're interested and want access to a fantastic trading desktop, mobile, and web application, just use the link in the description below.